we go.
Cool.
I might have to have you push the button for the thing. We'll see. Yeah.
Okay. This goes after this.
Okay. This is first.
Hello, everybody. If we could all get ready. All right. Good morning and greetings. My name is Kayla Iman Buchanan. I'm a history major, and I'm from Severn, Maryland. Welcome to the 2024 Dr. Rosalind Terborg-Penn Women's History Month Convocation. I would like to share the occasion with you. In 1926, Dr. Carter G. Woodson created Negro History Week to share the accomplishment of African Americans with the world. It's important to note that Dr. Woodson's organization, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, founded in 1915, crusaded throughout the 20th century to ensure that every citizen would know the name and work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. In 2024, Dr. Woodson's association continues to champion the researching, publishing, and promotion of African American history, life, and culture. Every year, the association selects a Black history theme to guide targeted discussion about African American history. The 2024 Black history theme is African Americans and the Arts. Morgan scholars continue to contribute to the annual activities of the association, as did our legacy faculty, such as Dr. Rosalind Terborg-Penn. To fast forward, Morgan State and Dr. Woodson found synergy in September of 1989 during the presidential administration of Dr. Earl S. Richardson. President Richardson instituted a year-long celebration of African American history and culture to be marked by monthly convocations, at which the Morgan community reminds itself of the achievements of its past and the imperative for greater triumphs in its future, at which it honors the great contributors to humanity. The year-long calendar from September to April consists of 9 convocations. In March, Women's History Month, this convocation highlights the contributions of women. In 2019, Dr. Edwin Johnson and others proposed that the Women's Convocation be renamed the Dr. Rosalind Terborg-Penn Women's History Month Convocation. President Wilson agreed, and in 2019, the inaugural Dr. Terborg-Penn Women's History Month Convocation was born. In brief, Dr. Terborg-Penn taught Morgan and over 35 years in the Department of History. Her research interests were African Americans and African American women's history. Her research pioneered the formation of African American women's history as a credible subfield within history. Thus, this convocation seeks to honor the legacy of gender-focused scholarship innovated by Dr. Terborg-Penn, as well as the importance of celebrating African American history and culture as envisioned by President Richardson. There are a number of anniversaries in 2024. 60 years ago, on July 2nd, 1964, the Civil Rights Act, signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson, prohibited discrimination in public places, provided integration of schools and other public facilities, and made employment discrimination illegal. The Dr. Martin Luther King Malcolm X Convocation, sponsored by Robert M. Bell Center, explored the impact of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Today, the Terborg-Penn Women's Convocation will continue to commemorate the centennial birthday of James Baldwin with the discussion between Dr. Anna Malika Tubb, author of The Three Mothers, How the Mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation, and Morgan's own Dr. Patricia Dockery, Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs. In closing, Morgan's trailblazing initiative in establishing this year-round celebration comes at a moment in the university's history at an all-time when the student body has urged the university to teach it more about its history. The university has responded admirably. Finally, for all the convocation content, please visit Morgan State's YouTube channel. Thank you. I would ask you all to stand for the singing of the Black National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing. Thank you. I would like to invite Tracy D. Williams to the stage to recite a poem by James Baldwin entitled Never Afraid.
No? This one? Thank you. Greetings, Morgan family, guests. Welcome to our cave, our home. I was charged to write a poem about James Baldwin, so I did. And while the poem pays homage to him, it is a love letter to you, to my family. See, black is not a favored color. It is my favorite color. And I put that on everything. So happy Black Women's History Month. James Baldwin, never afraid. Baldwin was never afraid to say it. He made me less afraid to say it too. Nikki Finney. If you have ever felt the sting of being called a nigger, Brother Baldwin offers balm in knowledge. Soothe your senses in knowing who you are and what you are. Queens and kings, heirs to not just anything or something, not a few things or many things, but all things, everything. Everything about this world, everything began with you. If you have ever sought shade to escape the darkening of the sun, Brother Baldwin encourages you, embrace your melanin, every hue of you, from elephant ivory tusk to the blues and blacks of dawns and dusk. If you have ever been ashamed of your wide nose, your butt, your hips, the kink in your big hair, dark gums, full lips, Brother Baldwin invites you to laugh, smile, grin. Grin with him, because on any court and in any classroom, you possess the power to win. Native sons and daughters, do not bury your blues. Do not flee to the mountains or another country, hoping nobody knows your name. If Brother Baldwin could talk, he would tell. The devil finds work everywhere. Just the price of a ticket, nothing personal. When Mr. and Miss Charlie approach, do not step aside, cross streets, hang your head. Discover the Baldwin in you and never be afraid to tell, because no one else can tell what it is like to be alive, like to survive in this promised land of milk and honey hell. When you read another headline, see another brother homeless, hungry, see another sneaker hung from a power line, see another name chalked in the street, see. Don't scroll. Quicken the Baldwin in you. Be bold. Ignite the fire next time. Black people, remember, you are not auction block heifer, Moonmar cow. Spit that fear. You are not bull, steer, or stud. Shit that fear. Bear witness. Call a spade a spade. Do not continue to chew lies, self-hate gum, cud, and blade. Black people, remember, you are never, never their Negro. You have the means. Channel your inner Baldwin. Never be afraid to deconstruct delusions of complacent onlookers and content wannabes determined to avoid reality. Black people, the blueprint of you belongs to you. Never be afraid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that poem. It was wonderful. I would like to invite our interviewer, Patricia Dockery, and our conversationalist, Anna Malika Tubb. Thank you.
Is it on? Yes, it's on.
Hello, testing. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good to see all your faces. Good morning.
Yes, and thank you for being here. Good morning, Morgan family. Welcome, Dr. Tubbs. In addition to being our honored guest for our Terborg-Penn Women's History Month Convocation, you are actually helping us to kick off our year-long celebration of the centennial birthday of James Baldwin. And students, how many of you in here have read some James Baldwin before? Well, you're a faculty member, students, but we're always students, right? And she's at the front of the room. That's what we do, right? So, students, can I see a show of hands one more time? Okay, awesome. And if you didn't raise your hand, I encourage you to check out some of the books that I'll just briefly mention because, like Dr. Newson-Horst, James Baldwin is one of my favorite writers, and so Giovanni's Room, Go Tell It on a Mountain, If Beale Street Could Talk, The Fire Next Time, Notes of a Native Son. So just pick one. If you want fiction, pick, If Beale Street Could Talk or Giovanni's Room. If you want political essays, Notes of a Native Son, they're just whatever your flavor is. And if you want to play, the Amen Corner, right? So there's something in there for everyone. But Dr. Tubbs, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my honor. I'm happy to be here. Very
Awesome.
happy to kick us off.
She came all the way from California.
Yes,
so
from Los Angeles. Yes. I
yes.
brought my 4-month-old baby with me, so you'll probably see him outside. Yeah.
Yes.
Don't worry. A friend is with him. He's not alone.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming and bringing your baby. That says a lot about, you wanting to be here with us. Her book is called Three Mothers, How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation. So here it is. I have the paperback version. Some other folks did you bring any books to sell by chance?
I did not bring any books to sell, but
Okay.
I would happily sign any books that anybody has, and they're available everywhere. And I love the paperback version, but also if anybody has the black version with the mom's faces on it, somebody back there has it, also really powerful.
Dr. Newson
Yes.
has that one.
Yeah, a fun story about this. It was really difficult actually to make this cover possible because of the erasure of these women. There were so few images available of them. And so as much as possible, I'm always saying when we can get that book and show everybody their faces, it's a big part of fighting the erasure of these incredible 3 women.
Okay, awesome. Well, in your book, you write that this book brings attention to, quote, the women who have been almost entirely ignored throughout history, Alberta King, Bertus Baldwin, and Louise Little. You explain in your book, quote, I chose to focus on mothers of sons. Black men were certainly not the only leaders of the civil rights movement. Mothers of revolutionary daughters have also been forgotten. I simply chose 3 figures who are often put in conversation together and who demonstrate the distressingly strong erasure of identity in the mother-son relationship. Can you tell us a bit about your journey to write the book?
Absolutely, yes. So this book came as a result of many different experiences in my life. As we all know, any accomplishment you have, it relates to things that are far out of your control, right? Who raised you, where you were born, et cetera. And all of these factors came into this book. But I often summarize it by saying first that I had an incredible mother myself. She was a lawyer who advocated for women's rights, both in the US as well as abroad. So I spent most of my life traveling from country to country through her work. And everywhere that we went, she told us to focus on how mothers were being treated in each of these different societies, because she believed that that was an indicator for how this country, society, community would do overall. If mothers were being supported, taken care of, if they were being given the resources that they deserve, then that country would do well. And vice versa. It was also true in her theory that if mothers were not being given the resources and the backing that they deserved in their communities, that community would not do well. And so she really believed that in the US, we were not supporting mothers enough, that there was not enough already built into our nation. We didn't have affordable childcare for everybody. We don't have universal paid leave, for example. And this is one of the many reasons why we continue on these kind of cycles of discrimination, cycles of exclusion, cycles of poverty, and all of that she really believes could be fixed if we were paying more attention to the role of motherhood. So I grew up thinking motherhood is so powerful, so influential, so important. And when I realized that not everybody saw it that way, I felt like I had a calling to do something about that. Fast forward to when I was starting my PhD, I read an incredible book called Hidden Figures, which went on to become, of course, this amazing film. The book was written by Margot Lee Shetterly, and I felt inspired to join her in what she was doing, this mission to make sure that we were fighting the erasure of Black women's stories, that we were correcting our telling of history that excluded us, and making sure that we were going to tell it correctly moving forward. And I said, I'm going to be somebody who does that. I'm going to join Margot Lee Shetterly in this, and I'm going to combine it with my passion for telling mothers' stories. So this was long before I had my children, my own children. I've always been really appreciative of this role. And so while I was doing the research, while I was writing the book, I was expecting my first son. And so it became more or less the political and also more the personal. It was this combination of, I need to do this not only for these three women, but I also need to do it for myself and all of my contemporaries, as well as my foremothers, this mission to make sure that the correction of this erasure would be accomplished, and that people would come to this work, as many people as possible. I have this goal. And so the reason I ended up talking about these three women in particular is because I realized, sadly, our nation is largely a patriarchy. And I knew more people would come to my work if the names MLK Jr., Malcolm X, James Baldwin were on it. And it's wonderful that we celebrate these men. We absolutely should. We rightfully should. But these three men also would have told us how important their mothers were to them. In my work, I realized in everything that I found that the sons were constantly trying to give credit to their mothers. They were constantly saying, you know, I learned this from my mom. And it was journalists and researchers before me and historians and scholars who kind of kept that under the rug. Even if the sons said it, they sort of felt that doesn't really go with our idea of who the heroes of the story are. So we're going to kind of erase that very intentionally. And so it's been my pride and joy that my very first book was about these three women, and to be the person who is correcting the erasure of Alberta King, Broadus Baldwin, and Louise Little, who I hope we'll get to talk a little bit more about through the questions.
Awesome. Well, I mean, what an inspiring reason for doing this work. And as a Black mother myself, who had a wonderful Black mother who contributed to who I am and my worldview, I really appreciate the work that you've put into this really important piece here. a point that really resonates with me also is the idea of resistance. And in your book, you write about how by erasing or not highlighting the roles that these mothers played in their sons' lives, that Americans are missing an important piece about Black resistance. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the reasons I wanted to focus on Black motherhood in particular is because often when we are activists, when we're speaking about what is hurting us to this day, we often say we're being treated as if we're less than human. And people might say that's hyperbole, you're being dramatic, they're always trying to reduce our feelings around this. But when you look at Black motherhood in the US, it is undeniable, this dehumanization, because Black women are the only ones throughout American history who by law were deemed the givers of non-life, that our children were somebody else's property. That was written in our American law, right? And of course, Black women have never accepted that to be the case. And so Black women have always had to envision beyond what was readily available to us. We've always been unable to accept the circumstance as it is. We've always had to show the world what we see, that we all deserve to be treated with dignity, with respect, and especially our children, the most precious beings in this world. Black women have always seen children as a new start to life, right? When we're talking about the difference in Black feminist theory around motherhood and dominant white feminist theory around motherhood, it's very different. A lot of white feminist theory will say that motherhood is almost a reproduction of the patriarchy because we're being cast into this domestic role. Black women, one in particular, June Jordan, would say, every time our children are born, the world begins again. And so we see it as a way to create new life, to get the world to see things through our eyes, to not wait until the world is ready for our vision, but to make them join us in this vision and to get on our path of freedom. And so that goes beyond even biological motherhood. We see this in our community mothers. We see it in our aunties. We see it in our foremothers. We see this constant resistance, this constant pushing back against somebody denying our humanity. When people deny our humanity, we create new life, whether that's, again, through our children or through our activism, through our art, through our creativity. There's all these many ways in which I define resistance being Black women giving life every single time somebody tries to deny that to us.
Wow, awesome. Okay. Okay, so let's shift to Baldwin's mom in particular. Yes. So Baldwin writes about his mom, references her. Can you speak to how she's characterized throughout his work and, say something about their relationship that we may not, readily know?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to start by first talking about the fact that many people who are Baldwin fans, and even if you're not that big of a Baldwin fan, you know a lot about his stepfather, right? A lot of people have mentioned the stepfather, which is something we tend to do as American historians. We focus so much on the impact of men and the impact of fathers. And so you knew probably that he was an abusive stepfather, that so much of what Baldwin experiences comes as a result of this man who is really himself trying to figure out what it means to be a Black man in America, but sadly takes so much of that pain out on his family. So I kept asking this question, why do we know this father so well, right? Even though he wasn't that great of a father, but we've denied our attention to the woman who was there day in and day out, loving, constantly supporting Baldwin's dream. Why are we not giving her at least as much attention, if not more, than the person who was hurting him and trying to keep him from his passion? And so Burtis is really, in so many ways, the antithesis of this stepfather figure that we have elevated as being the most influential part of James Baldwin's life. That is really absolutely not true. So I'll start by talking about Burtis when she was born. She was born in this tiny town of Deal Island, Maryland, and she was influenced by the fact that she lost her mother. And I think in my research, I point out that I believe her mother passed away during childbirth, because I found her mother's death certificate as well as Bertus's birth certificate, and they have the same month and the same year, which tells us likely that it was either the day she was born or something in relation to giving Bertus life. And so she grows up surrounded by her other family members, her siblings, her father, and she becomes fixated on how you find the light, no matter how dark your circumstances might be, and how you find the positivity, how you make it through those harder times. And so she takes this passion and applies it in her schooling. So a fun story is that I didn't know if Bertus had gone to school, right? When I'm doing this research, we can't take for granted in the early 1900s what education a young black girl might have been, offered or received. And I was able to call one of her daughters and had a phone call with her, and I said, I know this is kind of a hard question to ask, but I'm just curious, was she educated? And she goes, oh, my mother was the most brilliant mind. She said, I don't know where she went to school, but she was so brilliant. She wrote these incredible letters. Her understanding of vocabulary was so strong. And so in my research, I figured out that there was only one school she could have possibly gone to. And through this school, she takes this passion for finding the light, for finding the positivity, and applies it to her writing. So she was always a writer. She believed in the power of language, the power of how that could change people's minds. And she applies that into letters that she gifts everybody who knows her. So on their birthdays, she would give everybody a letter, and she never forgot anybody's birthday, and would tell them how you make it through the dark times in your life. And she applies that to what she's seeing nationwide when Jim Crow reigns supreme. How do we make it through this dark time? How do we focus on the light? So she leaves Deal Island, Maryland when she's only a teenager. She's seeking something bigger for herself. She becomes part of the Great Migration. She first goes to Philadelphia, and then she arrives in New York right in the middle of the Harlem Renaissance. And so for a writer to arrive during the Harlem Renaissance, how incredible that must have been for her. She's a young woman with all of the dreams she has of the positivity that she's carrying with her and what she wants to do with that. But then she also finds herself expecting. And she's going to be a single mother in this. And of course, that first son is James Baldwin. And when he later becomes the famous James Baldwin, he says that he is a witness to the power of light. And he uses his writing to be that witness. So it's not that he's just come up with this. He's directly quoting his mother. And Bertus is the one who is constantly telling him, you can do this. You can have a passion for art, because his stepfather believed that that was actually the devil's work. When James Baldwin wants to go see a play, his stepfather tries to step in and say no. And Bertus is constantly putting herself in between these two men to protect her son's dream, her son's passion. She supports him when he wants to go to Paris, even though that's her first baby and she doesn't want him to leave. She knows that he has a calling. And there's this powerful story that I found where the teachers at Baldwin's schools realized, because they kept asking, how is this kid so smart? He came from a really, really humble background. They're really struggling to make ends meet. Bertus has 8 other children. She is doing her best to provide for them. But somehow Baldwin is always the smartest kid in each of these schools. Some teachers say he's even smarter than the adults in the schools, right? He's writing plays. He's working on early pieces of what will become novels later. And one particular principal writes, it is clear to me, based off of just the letters that Bertus sends to excuse his absences, that he inherits his writing talent from his mother. Wow. Can you imagine? I have 3 children, and I don't know what letter I could write to say my kid is sick. That you're going to say, wow, this is a powerful writer. And so when I find this piece of evidence, it was clear people knew he was inheriting these talents from her, and he knew that too. So later in his career, and I don't want to give all of it away, it's all in the book, but he has a moment where he wants his family to read some of the lines of a play that he's working on called Blues for Mr. Charlie. And it's in honor of Emmett Till. And he has different family members read certain lines. And he says that he thought about casting his mother because he even didn't realize how powerful a performer she was. So when he passes away, one of his final wishes in life is that he'll be buried with his mother. She passes actually after him. So in all three of the cases in the book that I write about, all the mothers outlive their sons, very sadly. But James says, when it's her time, I want her to join me. And so they are buried next to each other. So to this day, if you want to go and visit James Baldwin's body, there is a plaque that says Baldwin in the middle, James on one corner, Burtis on the other. And if that's not a testament to what a son knows about his relationship with his mother, and he says, if you're going to honor me, you must always honor her.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of light, I have to tell you that it is just delightful listening to you and your passion about this work and what you found out, and even your personal story about your mom and what it means to be, presenting before us as I'm going to say young mom and scholar. But your energy is infectious, and I really appreciate that. So I just wanted to say that before we moved any further, because you're completely delightful and brilliant. I have a question that I want to end with, but before that, because we have students here of all different majors, and you were an anthropology major. As I'm an anthropologist.
Yes, go anthropology.
Yes, and your PhD is in sociology.
My PhD in sociology and my master's is in gender studies.
Okay, so shout out to the humanities and social sciences, yes. Right. I wonder if you could tell the students about the writing process, like how you found this information, because I think oftentimes, the public will have us to believe that people who study the humanities or social sciences are just sort of navel-gazing or doing, this research that doesn't really apply to anyone. It really has no meaning, and that we're just reading books. But clearly, you did some archival work. There's, interviews. So that's, was multifaceted. So can you speak to that so that our students know the plethora of things that they can do with their, I hope, anthropology degree?
Yes, I love that question.
Women's and gender studies.
Yes, I love that. We can clap for that, yes. I have so many things to say about that. When I started in undergrad and said I wanted to major in anthropology, my dad particularly, Ghanaian man, was very like, no, you're not going to make money off of that. You cannot do that. So I majored in medical anthropology to give him a little bit of what he wanted. And I remember there was some article that came out that said this is the most underpaid.
Every year it says that.
Is it still? Still.
And philosophy. Yeah.
The most underpaid degree, do not do it, avoid it at all costs. My biggest thing, though, is that if you're passionate about something, this is going to sound a little cliche, you can be not only the best at that, but you can make it what you want to make it. And that's the thing that's really powerful about the humanities, and something that people are appreciating even more now with advances in, AI, artificial intelligence, because you can actually reproduce code pretty easily, right, with a machine, but you can't reproduce human thought. And of course they're trying to, and you could get the type in article written by Anamika Tubbs, and somebody could come up with something, I would say. But my brain that was available online is actually completely different than the one I'm holding right now, and the experiences that I'm bringing with me. So I often feel almost like a lot more job security right now than I think some other professions do. But when I majored in anthropology and then became really interested I specifically was looking at sex education in the United States when I was an undergrad. But I realized there's so much more I need to know and understand about gender, because I'm already even just thinking about this binary, and I need to better understand what else is there. And so I did my master's in gender studies, and then with sociology thought, now I'm going to really apply this beyond. So I've always been somebody who's just keeping on thinking about what's the next door that's going to open for me, always open to the possibility of that, and not feeling like I needed to be confined, and creating my own path. As an undergrad, I read Melissa Harris Perry's Sister Citizen, and I heard somebody refer to her as a public intellectual. And I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. I've always known I've loved school. I always knew I was going to try to get a PhD and kind of go far with my studies. But I didn't always feel like I wanted to be a professor right away. There was something else I wanted to do with this work. I wanted to make sure that anybody could relate to something that I was writing and be available beyond the ivory tower, and that I could talk to audiences and bring them together in conversation around race and gender. I just didn't realize that that actually already did exist. Like, this was a path. And so I started to learn more about these public intellectuals. What I'm going to put a pin in there is not necessarily that you need to follow that same path, but who are some of the people that are leading the lives that you would like to live, that you would like to join in that kind of work? Melissa Harris Perry, for me, when I read that book, I said, I want to do this. Same with what I said with Margulies Shetterly. I want to do this. I can do this. And so beyond that, I thought, okay, I can be a public intellectual. I can make sure my work has an impact, even beyond the university. I can be somebody who writes in an inclusive way where people can understand what I'm saying, and it doesn't have to be this academic jargon. I don't have to perform. I can make this work for me. So I knew that all along. And the kind of research that it takes to write this kind of book, it was really difficult. I was trying to emulate Hidden Figures. I was also trying to emulate The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And it's such an incredible book. But in both of those books, they could interview the people that they were talking about. And so I had kind of set myself up with a really huge task, saying to my dissertation committee, I can do this. I just don't know where I'm going to start quite yet. And I started with the Suns. The works that they had written, any speech that they'd given, I combed through for any mention of their mothers and pulled that out. Then I moved on to works that were written about the Suns and said, looked through all of those. Any mention of the moms, I pulled those out. Then I reached out to the scholars if they were still alive and asked if they were willing either to be interviewed or to share any information they had with me about the mothers. And many of them did have archives about the mothers, but nobody had ever asked for them. Wow. And so they shared those with me. And then I reach out to local historians in each of the places that the women ever lived and ask them to help me find the birth certificates, the death certificates, census data, not only on the women, but also on their family members, land deeds. So in the case of Burtis, for example, she doesn't appear in any census data, but her sister did. And in one of James Baldwin's books, he mentioned that she always referred to her mother as her sister, Beulah, because she had lost her mother at such a young age. And because in the birth certificate and death certificate that I told you all the discovery that I found, I then look towards why he says that her sister was the mother, Beulah. I could find Beulah in the census data. And I also was able to find Beulah's land property. So I then could track where Burtis was because of Beulah. So this is kind of how each connection was made. And then I'm just filling in the blanks whenever possible. And that is when I started to reach out to the family members. With these three families, they are some of the most celebrated but also investigated families when you really think about it. And I say investigated because they've been put really in this kind of fishbowl where we forget that these men that we're talking about and constantly really dissecting are their loved ones. This is very recent history, right? This is James Baldwin's sisters, James Baldwin's nephews, right, who I'm talking to. I need to come ready, prepared. I'm a mere PhD student, right? Like I wasn't a New York Times bestselling author then. I was reaching out to them, asking very personal questions. And of course they were very, I would say, a little suspicious. They're skeptical. They want to make sure that I'm going to respect this part of their life and that I'm going to treat it with the respect that it deserves. And so I didn't want to show up and just say, hey, here's my questions. I want to say, I've done this research. There's some things that I've found. I even actually found Burtis's actual birth date. They thought she was born a year later. Her birth certificate said differently. And so I was able to say, I just want to celebrate her, and here's all that I've done so far. And for some of the family members, they said, yeah, I want to talk to you about this. For other family members, they say, no, Which, if you think of your own life, if someone comes to you and if you have siblings or cousins and says, hey, we want to talk about so-and-so in your life, some of you are going to say, yeah, and others are going to be like, absolutely not. You know, you're going to have different opinions. They're real lives, real families. And so, yeah, in the Baldwin case, though, I was able to talk to several of the family members, and they all constantly repeated the same things about her, that she was filled with love and light, that she gifted them this letter on their birthdays, that they were carrying her legacy forward, and that she was by far the most important member of their family.
Wow, that's awesome. Awesome. Thank you. The last question is, can you share one story or vignette or something that you learned from your research that just, inspired you or just took you aback or it just moved you in some way that you weren't expecting, or just, a piece that just really you want to share with us?
I feel like I gave you all so many already, but I do have many more. I'm just trying to think what's the right one to end with. I think for me, it's really just the fact that Bertus lived such a long and beautiful life despite the many different tragedies that she faces, where she's born in 1902 and she doesn't pass away until 1999. So she gives birth to 8 children. She is this incredible writer, like I spoke about, but she also loses 2 of her sons before her own time. So not only James, but his brother as well, David. She also is the survivor of domestic violence. And then her husband dies when she's in her 30s. So she's a single mother in her 30s trying to make all of this work. And the fact that everybody who remembers her, who is still alive today, is still speaking about how she's all about light and love, despite what we know she experienced, I think is really incredible. And one of the reasons I was so passionate about exploring Bertus and James's relationship is because he was a queer man. And I was going to talk about Martin, I was going to talk about Malcolm, and I was trying to think of who my third was going to be, because I really didn't want to just do 2, because when we do 2, it's really easy for us to think of them as opposites in some way. And that's really wrong, and they didn't see themselves as opposites, and when we describe them that way, we're doing a disservice to our history. But by adding in Baldwin, it became very clear that there was these many different approaches to our freedom, and that there was much more overlap between them than there were differences. But also thinking about how was it possible that he was so brave, not only as a Black man, but as a queer man at this time. Was there something in this relationship with his mother? And this question that I had. And what I found was absolutely yes. She was ahead of her time in so many ways. There's no evidence that she had anything to say about his sexuality being something that she was ashamed of. And she does talk about things that she was ashamed of. She didn't like that he cussed. And she didn't like that he drank a lot. She said that these are the 2 things that she worried about. So we know that if she did have a concern about this, she would have said something. Instead, she's so focused on love and acceptance. And her belief was that the most important thing she could do in life, her version of activism, even though she wouldn't have called it activism, but I'd term it activism, is showing her children their worth and how they deserve to be treated based on how she loved them. So that anywhere they went beyond her home, they would know what treatment they deserved because of how their mother treated them, how their mother loved them day in and day out. This was her impact, not only on her children, but also on every single person that she gifted these letters to. And then, of course, all the people who her children have now impacted in this world. What James Baldwin did in his work was entirely about love. Love for us, but also love for those that were hurting us. He's constantly saying, we're doing this for you. And I find that to be so brilliant and such a testament to the way her life lives on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Do we have time for another question, or do I need to just stay?
I would like to open up to the audience, but
I'd
unless
love to.
for those who have to go to class, if you'd like to leave now, you're welcome to do so. Dr. Docker, you're welcome to take the floor. If anyone has a question, I'll be down here with the microphone. So I'll come over to you, Dr. Ship. Yes, go ask your question, Dr. Docker, and I'll walk around the mic.
Oh, I was just going to speak to your point about Baldwin and love. Oh, your point about Baldwin and love. We see that even though he could really take America to task on racism and sexism and all the isms, he definitely did it with love. And there's a new show on right now on Hulu called Capote. It's Feud and Capote versus the Swans. But there's a episode where James Baldwin comes to the aid of Truman Capote, who's been so bad. He's been so bad. But the whole exchange between Baldwin and Capote is that of, I'm not going to say he was maternal, but he comes to Capote when he's really down, and he says, you have to get up, and I'm going to be here to help you get up. And so I think that speaks to that level of love for humanity. So that was really cool. So check it out. And the guy who plays Baldwin is masterful.
As well.
Yeah, he's great.
I have to watch it. That just reminds me of, oh, was there a question? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, can I tell this story really fast? It just reminds me of when Burtis's husband, who again has been horrible, is about to pass away. James comes home and Burtis says, you need to go and forgive him before he passes. And James says, I don't want to do that. Like, this man has been horrible, right? And she says, for you to hold this, I'm paraphrasing here. I think I have the direct quote in the book. But for you to hold this hatred is only hurting you.
Yes, absolutely.
And she says to him, as my son, I need you to let this go so you can live. And I need you to go and forgive him. And so he goes and he talks about this moment of seeing this man who had wreaked such violence in his life and kind of scared him in so many ways. He sees him in this state where he's about to pass away, and he can see very clearly really what the United States has done to this man, and also how much it's going to matter for him to tell his followers, to tell his audience members to carry that same kind of love and forgiveness so that we're not holding all of the hatred. So it's another moment where Burtis influences him and it influences his work. So that reminds me of that. Yes.
Hi, thank you
Hi.
for your presentation. I'm E.R. Ship, and I'm a professor of journalism. I want to give a plug for journalism because of your approach to this work. I actually have, as a journalist, you have the opportunity to become a witness to all kinds of things. So I have a couple of little witness moments here. Mother Baldwin was at the memorial service, of course, for James at St. John's Divine Church in New York City. And I have this notion, influenced by James Baldwin, of being a witness. So bearing witness. So I go to big funerals like that to bear witness, and I go to small ones too, but I was at that one. And as is my custom, I try to find the first seat available to the public that's closest to the action. So I did that. I carefully picked a seat. And wouldn't you know that they wheeled in Mother Baldwin, and she was right in front of me. And she lost it when they started playing the recording of Baldwin singing Amazing Grace, I think it was. Now, here I am trying to be big, tough reporter, but it was very difficult when she lost it, just gave in to her emotions. Skip ahead a year or so, a documentary was being debuted at the Schomburg Center about Baldwin. So I did the same thing. I made my way to find the best seat, and wouldn't you know, they wheeled in Mother Baldwin. And the same thing happened. And then to go back to another one of your subjects, in 1974, I was an intern at the Atlanta Journal, their first black journalism intern. And that was the summer that Mother King was killed.
Yeah.
And that became one of the stories that I covered as a summer intern.
Wow.
I love your approach to research that you described, and I'll play back this part of the tape for my students because I teach research. But I have a question. When you find all of these facts, what's the process of turning them into a story? And to what extent are you called upon to factionalize some of this or fictionalize some of this information in order to tell the story?
Oh, such a beautiful question. And it's such an honor to be in your presence, that you've been in these incredible moments. And I can only imagine the career that you have lived. I want to read all of your articles. Wow, to sit behind Bertus Baldwin twice. That's incredible. And yeah, it's such a difficult question, because we come up against this every time in our research, and not only around the facts of, where she was born or what it says on the birth certificate, but in the interviews especially. And this is another reason why I wanted to leave the interviews towards the end, is because our version of truth is very different depending on who we are. Yeah, and so if you ask, again, if you think about your own family, and I'm thinking about my siblings, if somebody asked me my opinion of what happened with something my mom did, let's say, I'm the youngest of three. That's obviously something that's going to influence how I see my own mom. And my eldest sister would say something completely different. And so as the researcher who's asking these questions, I kept coming up around these moments of saying, okay, well, so-and-so said this, and now so-and-so said this. And they also then are telling me the thing that was written in whatever article, the one time that my mom was mentioned is wrong. And you're like, shoot, okay, well, I just put that in the chapter, and now I got to go back. And so as much as possible, I was very clear in the book of saying, when I'm filling in the blanks, like if I say, I imagine this might have been how they felt, right? And I really interweave my personal story a lot in the book so that I can be my most honest self as a storyteller, where I'm talking about myself as a mother expecting my firstborn, didn't know he was going to be a son, but is a son, and how I'm putting myself in their shoes. And then when I can't fill in what actually happens in their particular life, I bring in a lot of context around what's happening around them. So this also then became something really powerful, because I'm able to talk about some of their contemporaries. Because often when we're celebrating Black resistance, especially Black female resistance, we are so numb, really, to the pain and the experience that Black women are going through. We're so used to saying, wow, they really persevered, look how strong Black women are. And we forget all the many of us who we've lost. And so when I was able to bring in those contemporaries and help us all think about what could have happened to the three of them as well, I think it gives us even a greater appreciation of what they survived. But that's the way I tried to fill in those blanks. And it's interesting because, for the most part, I'm very spoiled by great reviews, so I can't complain. But there are a few people who have said, when you say something like "you imagine," it feels like you're putting yourself into it more than we want you to. And I say, actually, every writer does that. I'm just telling you when I'm doing it, because there is no way to recreate somebody else's biography without, especially when you can't interview them, without inserting yourself. So I try as much as I possibly can to signal when this is me saying something based off of, sometimes a very educated guess. Yes, I am the expert in these three women. However, I am not them. And I also speak to how sad that makes me, that nobody thought to sit and interview them before they passed. That's horrible. And yes, I overlapped in life with Bertus. I was born in 1992, but I was 7 years old when she passed. Why did nobody else sit down and ask her so that we could hear from her how she made these decisions? So yeah, that's my approach to it as much as possible. But yeah, each of the paragraphs in this book, I often say to people, one paragraph that, let's go back to the story I told you all about Bertus and her sister Beulah. That took me however many different sources that I already mentioned to all of you, but that only equals one paragraph. So every single paragraph is 20 different sources. And I'm trying my best to, put the narrative together. But one of the things that I feel really proud of is how many people tell me that it reads like a fiction. You get to really know these characters. It's very smooth in terms of how I wrote it. And that was very difficult to do. So I always do appreciate hearing that. So thank you. What a powerful question.
I have a question as well, and if anybody else have a question, they can raise their hand. But in regards to black silence, this is an element that I'm working on. You said why no one interviewed them. I know when I tried to record my mother, she said she would not talk in front of a machine. Yet her mother recorded something with her, which I have yet to find. But I just think the idea of black silence in the interior life, what does that mean? Because there was one situation in which I was helping her with something. I saw this wedding picture. I'm like, who is this? This isn't Dad. Who is this, Mom? Give me that! Give me that! And I said, there's a whole stack of these photographs here, lady. Let's have a conversation. So, but she was married before my father. I did not know this. So I think sometimes in terms of self-imposed black silence, and then also that idea of what Darlene Clark Hine calls dissemblance, where you have to present a face that can take those hits, because it's not going to be you. So how do you find that in terms of your new work that you're working on, and as you kind of evolve into this kind of morass that we're dealing with politically here as well, both in the academy as well as society?
Whoa, what a great question. Yes. And also to add to it, there's also this protective element. Right, when I was saying that I wanted to talk to the family members about the women, I think some of them felt like, oh, no, you're not going to do to my mom what people have done to my brother, right? Where, what are you trying to find, like the next scandal, and why are you, trying to poke hole, like let her rest in peace, right? And so for me to prove to them and gain that trust to say, I'm doing this because I want to honor her. I don't want to hurt her, right? I don't want to. And so this is a big part of, being black people in the U.S. who is trying to hurt us. And there's so many of those people. But this is, for me, even more of a reason why we have to produce work about ourselves. Because other people, and Audre Lorde says this, will try to define us. So we need to put our work out there as much as possible. And I often use this comparison between Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, who were both obviously some of the most incredible people to have ever lived and who freed more people than we can even count. But Frederick Douglass was very obsessed with his story. He wrote his story over and over and over again. He was very passionate about making sure that if people were going to study him, they could go to him as a source. Harriet Tubman was so dedicated to her work that she did not have time to sit and write her story or to even spend time obsessing about her story. And how many black women can say the same exact thing? I don't have time. I'm doing the work. And I'm not doing this work for recognition. I'm not doing this work for fame. I get that. But for the researcher coming after you who wants to tell the world what you did, it matters to have those primary sources. And so it's a combination of gaining the trust, right, of those elders who are saying, I don't want to tell my story. What are you trying to do with my story? Why do you want to know this? But also they're struggling with having been told their whole lives, black women should happily sacrifice ourselves for everybody else, and no one needs to know that we were the ones who did that. We don't have to get credit for that, especially black mothers. We're celebrated for as much as we deny ourselves. That's the best we can do as mothers. No, that is not the thing I want us to aspire to any longer. Make sure your children know. Make sure you children ask those who came before you their stories before it's too late. And if they're not doing it for themselves, if they're not doing it for their own recognition, make sure they know they're doing it for you and those coming after you. Because we need to know for our survival those strategies, those techniques, that intentionality. This book is filled with the intentionality of these three women. These were not mistakes. It's not necessarily that they were like, I want my children to be famous. That's not what they were thinking of. But they were thinking day in and day out, how do my children not only survive this nation, but find joy, find love? And they are intentional about that. There are techniques, there are strategies. Louise Little, Malcolm X's mom, cuts out newspaper clippings from all these different articles around the world so that her children day in and day out know that they are part of an international army of people. What are we all doing? What is the intentionality? So it's even in the questions that we ask those who came before us. It might not be, hey, who's this person in this picture? I want to know. But more so, what did you dream about when you were a girl? What did you want to do in life? That opens up a whole other world of seeing the humanity of these Black women. I'll stop there. I could go on and on.
Thank you so very much. Fitting coda.
Oh
Dr.
my
Dockery?
gosh. I'm going to just say, what a way to kick off Women's History Month. Holy moly. And I know Dr. Jones is going to close out, but I want to recognize the amazing women who put this program together. Dr. Ida Jones, Dr. Newson Horse right here, Ms. Cozart. Who else should we recognize?
Every woman on this campus.
Every woman on this campus. And again, I just want to say thank you on behalf of President Wilson, our provost, Hung Tao Yu, the College of Liberal Arts. We are just so grateful that you are here with us today. You are inspiring. I feel like I can go and do something amazing right now. Seriously. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so
Your
much.
joy.
Well, Dr. Dockery just took a page of my closing remarks. So thank you so very much. We appreciate you because she is amazing, a playwright, a novelist as well in her own right. So she is quite a star on campus as well. So we want to thank her for her underwriting as well. So for those students who remain, I think you got a very good nugget to really chew on in terms of who Rosalind Terborg-Penn was and what her vision for gendered studies is. It's not a this or that, it's a this, or this and that. And that's what we seek to do, and Dr. Tubbs did an excellent job of weaving in the gendered voices of the matriarchs of the family. I want to thank our AV team, Luther Moore and his group in the back. Thank you so very much. They always fall in line. Dr. Johnson, Dr. Edwin Johnson from the Convocation Committee as well. The English department and the history department. Miss Kayla Buchanan, our undergraduate, who was our MC or mistress of ceremonies, I think she tipped away. And then Miss Williams, who is a doctoral student in the English department, in her poem, James Baldwin, Never Afraid. Thank you as well. We're going to have the alma mater, but I have one additional note as Dr. Newson Horace is celebrating James Baldwin's centennial, and she's made all of us become James Baldwin files or Baldwinians. March 14th, which is next week, is the next program featuring artist Ernest Shaw, whose work inspired James Baldwin. I believe he's a Morgan alum as well, Ernest Shaw, and we heard about him as well, inspiring one of our classmates here, or faculty members, Mr. Briscoe. So we're having a Morgan celebrating Baldwin, so please look forward to that. We're going to play the alma mater, and then we're going to take our way out the door. Thank you. Please stand for the alma mater.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the singing of our alma mater by Mr. Darren Scott, accompanied by Mr. Brandon McCoy, members of the Paeta chapter of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia Fraternity of America, Incorporated.
Fair Morgan, we love thee, so tried and so true. Our hearts at thy name thrill with pride. We owe thee allegiance, we pledge thee our faith, a faith which shall ever abide. We pledge thee our love, we pledge thee our faith, whatever the future may bring. And thus our devotion, fidelity to, and homage we pay as we sing. Fair Morgan, as onward the years quickly fly, and thou livest in memory sweet, we bring thee our laurels, whatever they be, and lay them with joy at thy feet. We pledge thee our love, we pledge thee our faith, whatever the future may bring. and thus our devotion, fidelity to, and homage we pay as we sing. We pledge thee our love, we pledge thee our faith, whatever the future may bring, and thus our devotion, fidelity to.